Hi, I'm Louise Rasmussen, Strategic Planning Director here at LoSasso.
And I'm Kyle Briggs, Associate Creative Director here at LoSasso.
We were tasked with talking about the creative process at LoSasso, but as strategic planners and creatives do, we decided to build upon that topic and talk about the dynamic duo that makes up complementary but very different roles.
Mm-hmm. I think what makes this dynamic duo so special and so dynamic is that combination of left and right brain thinking, the more analytical combined with the more creative and imaginative and emotional. And I think standing alone, they can't really be as powerful, but together that's really where they start to work really well together. So when we were talking about what this looks like in kind of pop culture examples, we talked about Sherlock Holmes and Watson, how Sherlock was kind of that more eccentric personality and Watson was there to even him out and be more grounded. We also thought about Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and kind of how that dynamic was reflected there as well, with Captain Kirk being more emotional and passionate and Spock, again, leveling him out, being more logical, making sure he doesn't just blast off into space with his ideas. And then, of course, for the Pixar fans, we love the idea of the dynamic duo of Woody and Buzz, how Buzz kind of has those big dreams and Woody is more rational and brings things down to earth. So this is clearly a dynamic duo that works really well, and we continue to use here at LoSasso every day.
Yeah, and being that logical research side of things, I decided to do a little survey and get some data behind it. We asked our peers in Slack, if you were to come up with a dynamic duo that really explores the roles between strategy and creative, and we sent that out through Slack and it blew up. A couple of my faves that weren't kind of your typical character roles, but I think people were leaning into my British culinary were fish and chips, tea and scones, and then another one, hammer and nails. And I think just that example shows how they're very different components, but actually when they come together, that gets the end best result. So we wanted to talk about that a little bit today.
Yeah, and from my purview, I love the examples of Thelma and Louise and Bonnie and Clyde, obviously going for different goals there, but I think the message kind of holds true.
So thinking of that combination of skill sets, and it's all about the combination. If I was to pose the question, what would one be without the other? So when I think about life without creative from a strategist, I would be like, oh my God, that's unimaginable. Like the end result, yes, it might be clear, very strategic, but it'd be really dull, boring, lifeless, kind of soulless. When I think about what you do to a strategy, it's always brings a smile to my face. It kind of moves me. It creates an emotional response that breaks through the clutter and grabs my attention. It's that fresh, innovative, imaginative leap that you bring to it. I just couldn't imagine my job kind of ending off at strategy.
Thank you, Louise. Our creative team really appreciates that, but I do think that without the logic and the strategy behind it, sometimes that emotion can ring a little false or not hit the mark. We were talking earlier today about an ad that you remembered, but you didn't know who the brand was that put it out, and I think that's an example of leading with the creative without that undercurrent of strategy running throughout. So I think aligning on creative and strategy early on, making sure they are in sync is a great way to make sure we're aligned from the jump with the creative brief and sending our teams down the right path from the beginning with this clearly defined vision that both of us have agreed on. And we've added our creative twist and our strategic underpinnings to make sure that we're all moving in the same direction, saving time, saving resources. When they come together, that's kind of where we're most effective.
Talking about that very technical term of jump from the creative, we wanted to share a couple of insider ways that we work as a combination together with some technical terms. And I think the first key technical term that I would use to describe how we work together is noodling. And for noodling, often the strategy starts off very wide. It's very chaotic. You're looking for, what are some of the insights around the target? What are some of the revolutionary, unique things we can say about the product? How does that fit with cultural trends? And so you start very chaotic, but then you really start drilling down on what matters most. And in that process, I'll have to come to the creative partner that I'm working with, my partner in crime, and say, hey, here's a couple of one things, kind of really what matters most. Is this inspirational to you? And you'll often noodle it and we massage it in a way that's going to really give us that inspirational leap. So I think the other word that I would use in our process of this kind of dynamic duo of how we work together is bounce. And so when I'm giving a creative brief and we're looking at that, what's the most important thing to say? What I want to do is give you a creative, inspiring launching pad. So it's that bounce that sets it not only in the right direction, but really trajects it, inspires it, give you some inspirational thoughts to take it and elevate it to that next level.
Mm-hmm. And that definitely goes both ways, just in terms of you sharing your strategy with the creative lead, kind of making sure we're aligned there, but also the creative team sharing back with you to make sure, as the expert in the audience, that this will resonate with them and appeal to them. And then our last term that we use a lot is this idea of a gut check. So early and often we'll, on the creative side, touch in with Louise and make sure where we're heading is the right direction, again, from that lens of the audience expert, knowing everything that she does about that most important message that she's put together in her brief, and make sure we're aligned and we can keep trotting down the road we're going or switch gears if necessary.
I think, Kyle, if you don't have that person to volley with and somebody that's a good catcher thrower, then you're just not going to get to the best results.
I think you and I, Louise, would both go as far to say that if you don't have that strategic foundation under your creative work, then it's not working as well as it could. And conversely, if you do have that strategy but don't have that layer of creativity, you probably aren't connecting and resonating with your audience as much as you think you are.
Yeah, and I think one without the other, I would always say, you can see an ad that just has strategy and you're like, oops, your strategy's showing. And, when the creative's really not there, it's just not hitting the mark. It is the dull and the boring.
Well, and I think, too, we talked about this a little bit, the idea that AI is coming onto the scene. It hasn't quite mastered that mix of creative and strategy, and I think that's where a lot of our value comes in, to take both and turn it into something valuable and something that can't necessarily be achieved by AI yet.
Yeah, that breaks through the clutter and really connects. And at LoSasso, we often talk about marketing that moves you. And I don't think you can get to marketing that moves you if you don't have that dynamic process, if you don't have those different skill sets that are very collaborative and complementary to each other. So we would say, don't settle for anything less than marketing that moves you, but there's a dynamic duo that really propels that forward. And if you'd like to find out more about that and the way that we work, about our creative process, then really we'd love you to get in touch with our team.
Yep. Thanks for chatting.
Thanks for chatting, Kyle.